Aside from being a vehicle which really represented some of the worst things about buying a collector's edition of a game, given that for those like myself who did order it, as I'm sure some of you did as well, you got this car from day one, which was completely pointless because it's not like you could use it in that many events at the start of the game, and for 1,000,000 credits, it's not exactly difficult to save up for it either. Now I think they should have actually made this car more expensive, and there are a couple of reasons for that. See, many of us were thinking of the 917 Living Legend as essentially being like a Porsche Vision GT car, and in practice it kind of is, except it's actually more useful than what ended up being the Porsche Vision GT car in both open top and closed top forms. Now I love the electric ones, they are hugely fun to drive, and I said as much in the review of the open top car. This, just factually speaking though, is a way more useful machine, and I think a machine which a lot of people will vastly prefer, purely because it's not electric for a start. Now one reason which I think 1,000,000 credits was a bad choice is because that immediately puts it up against Vision GTs. This thing should have felt more special than that. I think it should have been maybe 5 million, possibly even 10, because again, for those who got that collector's edition of the game, you kind of want it to feel like you've earned something extra, not just a car you could have bought after literally 1.5 races at Le Mans, which to me kind of undersells how good this car actually is, especially when the original 917 is in the game and it is very expensive. Now speaking to that original, I will probably give some of you PTSD if I even mention the final license test on Spa, in the rain, in the old school 917. And if that is the car that we're inspired by, well, this could certainly go one of two ways. It could be great. I mean, after all, the 917 won 2 Le Mans events back to back right after the iconic GT40s run, but it's still a 70s prototype car, so of course it was leery to drive. A modern car very well could be, given that this is not a Vision GT, it is a direct inspiration and a modern homage and interpretation to that car. So it's a modern long-tail prototype, but with a distinctly more GT flair to it in some ways. One way is the weight. It's nowhere near as light as you'd probably hope, which is kind of surprising given that it's not an electric vehicle, but it weighs 1,220 kilos. Thankfully, it makes up for that, I would say more than makes up for that, with sheer horsepower. Nearly 1,000, straight out of the crate, 976 horsepower. And where things really get good, because this is not just one of those fluff piece reviews where I try to find something good to say about a Vision GT, because A, this isn't one anyway, but this actually genuinely is a really good and really useful car. But we'll get to that in a second, because the first reason why it's good is because of the point level. See, if you take something like a C7 Stingray, and I've actually done this, tune it up in every way except for power, you can get that thing over 800 points. So to have a car at that level is no big deal at all in this game. You can easily be pushing out those numbers. This, with 1,200 kilos of weight, nearly 1,000 horsepower, and literal race-bred DNA, sits at 816. That really is not that high. That's more powerful than a lot of Vision GTs, and this thing genuinely is fast enough to worry prototype cars, Vision GTs, and in some cases wipe the floor with stuff like GT machines. Even like a tuned up Group 3 car is going to struggle in some cases to keep up with the pace that this thing can hit. Now I will say, and I actually like this about the car, one way in which it does homage the original 917 is that it's not a pushover. This car is not designed to hold your hand, and it's not designed to be necessarily beginner friendly. Ironically, given that it was a bonus that we could have at the start of the game, it is a car which is rewarding for the effort and respect which it demands. It's one of those cars that doesn't just make it difficult for the sake of it, it is rewarding. I use this for quite a few different races, and because it's only 816 points, you can easily sacrifice a little bit of weight or a little bit of power and get it down to 800 points, no trouble at all. And because of its innate performance and potential, you can kind of run away with a victory in this thing on a number of tracks, from Le Mans to much more technical stuff. it is a car which I would say takes some of the best aspects of what those of us who do love Vision GTs love about them, but then it actually makes it feel a little bit more grounded in reality. So it's not a completely pie-in-the-sky, crazy hydrogen-powered, laser-powered, fully electric, whatever alternative. It still has those old-school roots of an internal combustion engine, but it's forward-thinking in terms of bringing that legend to the modern day, with Porsche's modern performance and their modern, just sheer overwhelming prowess of making even road cars that could destroy race cars from even a couple of decades ago. That's what the 911 is good for. So of course this thing should feel like a blend of challenging but rewarding, and when used correctly, I would say devastatingly effective. For 1,000,000 credits, I think this is actually a steal of a car. It makes for a gorgeous livery base, a canvas to paint with. There are tons of great liveries, from the obvious stuff like Gulf and Martini to even some rarer ones. This one that I'm running, which, unless I'm mistaken, is inspired by the Porsche RS Spider, which is one of my favourite LMP2 cars. And yeah, ultimately that's it for my thoughts on the Living Legend. I think it's a really cool addition to the game, but just like some of the others which I've already talked about, because it was in the game from day one, and weirdly enough even more so for those of us who had the collector's edition, where you get the car without putting any effort in, it's easy to overlook the car and easy to forget about it, because it's so good that you just kind of take it for granted. And that happens quite a lot, I think, with Porsche. They're just good, and you expect them to be. Overall though, if you haven't tried it out, it's definitely worth a look, because this thing really is formidable. Do you use the car a lot? Do you love it? Or do you think it's maybe too close to a Vision GT style for you to enjoy it? I could see that being the case for some people. Either way, let me know down below, and of course, stick around for more reviews on the channel in future. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.